Hello fellow Unreal Engine artists, designers and developers, and welcome to the latest episode of the Landscape Material series. In today's episode we're going to look at ocean level masks, so that when you have water on your landscape we can extend the ground mask to prevent foliage from being spawned beneath the ocean level and also to have the same material beneath the ocean level. So let's get straight into it. So for today's tutorial we're going to create a whole new landscape. We're going to create an island with ocean around it, and I'll be able to show you the problem we're solving and how to go about it. So in the description below you'll see a height map for the island, so download that first and then come back here and do File, New Level. We'll choose the basic level and I'm going to delete the volumetric cloud, the floor and the player start to create a level with just a sky in it, and then we will go into the landscape mode, and now you'll be able to import that island height map file that you downloaded a second ago. So click on import from file, click on the height map file to find it, and then click on import. Then you can come out of your landscape mode. And you can see what we have here is an island with a few mountains on it, but at the moment we don't have any ocean around it. So the next thing we need to do is to implement the water plugin from Epic Games to put an ocean around this island. So go into Edit Plugins, search for water, click on it. It's still experimental, but it's been around for quite a while now, and you'll need to restart your project. And you'll need to save the map if you before you go out. So click on Save Selected. Let's put it in the Maps folder and we'll call it Island. Once you're back in the project, close down the plugins window. You'll see this error message here: collision profile settings do not include an entry for the water body collision profile, which is required for water collision to function, and it's got a little link here. So just click on that and it will add the necessary entry to the engine config for you. Then that error shouldn't occur again. Clear the messages, and let's now open up our level. If you want to open up the island level every time instead of this Glacier Valley level, all you need to do is go into Edit, Project Settings, Maps and Modes, and you can set your default maps for the editor and the game. So let's change the editor one to Island for now, just because we're working on this for a little while, and then go into File, Recent Levels, and open up the island level. And now we're back where we were. So still no water in our level, but we have the ability to add it now. So go into the Add menu, go into All Classes, and type water, and you'll see there's various different water bodies. We want the ocean, so drag the ocean, drag it roughly on top of the island. You'll see there's a little spline layout, and you will see that there is a little bit of the island poking out there, but we are at the wrong level at the moment. So let's fix that, and we might need to fix something else with this water body setup as well. So let's change the height of this water body. So with the water body ocean selected, go to the location and change the Z to 0. And you'll probably notice that nothing's really changed here. Now that's because the water body has the wrong blending parameters. So if you go down to the water height map settings in water body ocean and open it up, you see it's got this alpha blend mode. If you change that to max, you can see that now the island reappears, and now we have an island with ocean around it but no materials applied yet. By the way, if you put your ocean in the wrong place, so you put it over here, you'll see that it generates a bit of a land mass around there. So all you need to do is to move the ocean spline into the right place, and if for whatever reason it's still poking out, say you did a small island, You can even scale it down. So go to your scale settings here and you can make it 0.1, make a tiny little land seed for the ocean. Anyway, let's get on with doing the material, and then we can show you what the problem is that we're solving today. So for our landscape material, let's use our Glacier Valley material instance as a starting point. So go into your content browser, find the material instance Glacier Valley, and do Control-D to duplicate it, and we'll call this MI Island. And we'll open that up a bit later on. And now go to your landscape and make sure that the landscape material is assigned. So you can either use a drop down, or if you've still got MI Island selected, you can just use the selected asset. You just want to make sure that the MI Island is the landscape material here. You'll now notice you've got a transparent landscape. 10 points if you remember what you need to do next to get rid of that. Yes, it's the paint layers that we need to set up. So go back to landscape, go to paint, and you should have these 3 layers here. If you don't have them there, then you might need to just save and restart the level. And we just need to assign these layer info assets for each of these. So click on plus, they're all weight blended, and just say save them in the default locations. So go through each one, weight blended layer, save, and the last one, the road, weight blended layer, and save. And now you can come out of landscape mode. And now we have a material on the island, but you can see that it is a snowy terrain, and that's because the Glacier Valley had a very low altitude for where the snow finished. So let me bring up the island material and we can start playing around with the parameters. Okay, I've opened up the island material instance and I put it on the right hand side of the screen. The first thing I want to do is switch off the snow layer, so let's go back down to snow and get rid of that. And you can see now we're getting a nice blend of ground, grass and cliffs. So let's go in a bit closer and we'll just do some changes to this. What I want is I want less of the ground. I don't want any of the puddles, so let's go up to the ground layer and switch off add puddles. And now I want a lot more grass there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the ground slope constraint to 100 to flatten out the ground. I'll make the mid-low slope constraint 5, mid-high slope constraint 2, and I'll probably leave it at that for now. So we've got a lot more grass to play with there. And by the way, if you want to just be able to see a bit more clearly what you're doing, the fog is a little bit high on here. So let's go into the exponential height fog and let's change the fog density to 0.02, and that makes it a little bit clearer to see what we're doing here. Now what I want to do is set up some grass and foliage on here on this layer so that I can show you what the issue is. So let's use our grass types now. Let's not use PCG, just to save a bit of performance while we're doing the development. So hopefully if you go to your landscape grass types folder and open up your grass type mid-low, you should still have 2 entries here for the 2 types of grass. We set for the first one, we set the grass density to 0 while we were doing PCG. Set that now to 40 or 50. Yeah, 40 will probably do, and you can see those grasses have reappeared on the landscape. That'll probably suffice. Now, if I zoom out a bit, you'll probably notice, especially if I get near the level here, that I'm also getting grass at the ocean level and going down below the ocean. And that's because the landscape material doesn't really have a concept of where the water level is. In fact, if I hide the water body for a second, you can see that going down from the water, it's now going back to grass again before it becomes ground based on the slope. So this is the problem that we're trying to solve today. What I want to do is add an ocean level mask at the water level and then be able to add that to the ground. So it'll extend our ground down below the ocean. and therefore we'll get the same material, and the grass spawning won't happen below the ocean level either. So for that, we need to set up another mask in our landscape material. Okay, I've switched the water body ocean back on, and let's increase the culling distance of our grass as well so we can see it in the distance. If you've still got the landscape grass type open here, you can change the end cull distance. Let's change that to 20,000, and we can see a little bit more grass going into the distance as well. All right, so a mask for the ocean level. It's pretty straightforward. What we want to do is go into our landscape master material, and let me just show you where we're going to add this. So if you go to the area where you do the masks, we have got these ground slope, mid low and mid high slope mask. What I want to do is after creating the ground slope mask, I want the ability to add to that mask with a switch that says if I want to add the elements below the ocean level to the ground mask. So what we'll do is we'll create a material function, and then we'll just plug it in between this slope mask and the ground slope mask named reroute. So let's go into our content browser again, materials, material functions, and we'll do a new material function, which I'm going to call MF Ocean Mask. Open it up, and we're going to create an input and an output first of all. So the input is going to be the ground mask, and that is an input type of scalar, a scalar value, and our output is ground with ocean mask. So it will be the ground mask plus the mask beneath the ocean. So we need to find a way of getting the level from the ocean level down. So what we'll do is we'll create a parameter first of all with S, and we'll call this ocean level. So this will be where we set the level of our ocean. Usually be 0, but it could be something different. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that into a group called ocean. And this will be our first parameter. And then next thing we want to do is we want to get our world position and subtract the ocean level, or rather subtract the world position from the ocean level. So that means that anything below the ocean level will have a positive value, and anything above the ocean level will have a negative value. And that effectively will mask everything beneath the ocean. Let's leave it at that for now. Let's now do a saturate, which, as we know, clamps the values between 0 and 1. Let's now add that to our ground mask. So literally just use an add node, and we're going to take the ground mask we've calculated, add the underwater mask here, and then because this value can be greater than 1 with adding the 2 masks, we'll saturate it again to clamp it back down between 0 and 1. And now we have our first iteration of the mask. So let's click save here. Let's go back to our master material, and all we need to do here is create a little bit of space for our ground slope mask. Move that over a little bit. Then open up the material functions folder, drag in the ocean mask and connect it up. So ground mask goes in, ground with ocean mask goes out. And let's just do make sure everything is saved. Come back here, and now you'll notice that the foliage no longer appears beneath there because now the ground has been extended below that ocean level. But there's a couple of things here. First of all, there's a very harsh line because we've literally just done a hard edge between where the ocean level is. So anything below it is on, anything above it is off. So we need to create a softer transition for that. And we also need to have the ability to switch it on or off. Let's just check that our ocean level works though. If we go over to the material instance and go down near the bottom, you should find a new group called ocean with ocean level. So if we put the ocean level up to 500, you can see that it has moved the ground mask up, further up the beach. If we do minus 500, you can see that now the ocean level is lower and a grass is starting to appear again. So let's put it back to 0. That's roughly where we want it. And let's sort out a softer transition and also a switch that where we can enable or disable that, because we won't want it for all of our landscapes. So back to the ocean mask. And what we'll do in order to soften the transition is, once we've subtracted it, we have that harsh mask between 0 and 1. What we can do is we can take that mask and use a divide. We've done this sort of technique before. Divide it in order to soften that mask edge. Plug that in here and we'll create another parameter. So choose your ocean level, duplicate it, and we will call this one ocean transition. And we'll leave it at 0 at the moment. We'll play around with that in a second. Put that in the divide and we'll make that the second parameter. And we'll also, while we're here, we'll put in a switch as well, whether we want it or not. So we're going to create another parameter, right click and do a static switch parameter. I'm going to call it use ocean level mask. And if it's true, then we'll take that output and plug it in here. And if it's false, we're just going to have a value of 0, so no mask at all. So use 1 on your keyboard, left click to get a value of 0. And if we add that 0 onto the mask, it won't change it at all. So if that switches off, just the regular ground mask. Okay, and now is probably a good time to comment all of this. We'll call it ocean level height mask. Save. And go back to your landscape and save that as well. You might not need to do that. And come back here. If we go over to our material instance, you now should see we've forgotten to put the ocean level mask into the ocean group as well. So go back to the mask, choose the ocean level mask here, and in the group, make sure it's ocean. And in fact, let's make that sort priority 0. So that's the very first thing you see in that group. Okay, so now back to the island. Open up the ocean and you can see that there's our ocean level mask. So if we click on it, then we see the other parameters here, and we've got the ocean level of 0 with that harsh line. So particularly over where the foliage is here, you can see that there is a very noticeable line where that grass layer is. So let's make the ocean transition 100. And you can see that has softened the edge there. So it's now a nice soft blend between the mid-low layer and the ground now goes right the way beneath the ocean. So if I switch the ocean off, you can see that there is no grass slopes or any other slopes beneath there. And then switch it back on, and that's looking pretty good. So that's really the end of the main tutorial today. But while we're here, let's just quickly set up the PCG and RVT just for practice on setting those up on new levels. Before we set up PCG, I'm just going to switch off the grasses that are being generated using the landscape grass types. So open up the grass type for the mid-low region, and I'm just going to set the grass density to 0 for both the main grass and the wheatgrass. I'm also going to set the density to 0. So now we don't have any grasses on that mid-low layer. You can now shut that down, and let's add a PCG volume into this landscape. So go into add volumes, PCG volume, and just drag it in to the landscape. I usually set the scale to something like 50. So you can see that orange box. That means I can do some tests just in a bounded volume if I need to at some point in the future. With that PCG volume selected, let's go down to the PCG component and choose our graph. So you'll be looking for landscape, PCG landscape that we selected. Once you've selected that, click on generate. And after a few seconds, you should see, instead of the grass being spread evenly all around, we've now got clumps of grass everywhere. If you're having problems with not seeing these generators, sometimes the physical materials don't always generate straight away. What you'll need to do is you'll just need to either have a go at building the landscape in the build menu, or worst case, just reload the level in order to get the physical materials to be written. I know I sometimes have a problem with that. So now we've got PCG working. That wasn't too complicated, but you can see that our grass is not blending into the landscape, and for that we need to set up RVT, and that's a pretty simple affair as well, because now we've got everything set up other than the landscape connections and volumes for this level. So go to your landscape, scroll down in the details until you find the virtual textures, so virtual texture area, and we'll need to create two elements in here. So first one is going to be our RVT color. So that's where we store our color, roughness, specular, normal information. And the second one is the RVT height, where we store the height of the landscape in order to calculate our blending distances. And once you've added those two in there, you can click on this create volumes. And by default, it will set up runtime virtual texture volumes for the height and the color for this landscape, and it's actually done everything now. So if you come down to the grasses, you can see that they are blending into the underlying material. So all I would do now is I would probably give some better names to some of these elements here. I might call this one here PCG mid-low for the PCG volume, and for the runtime virtual texture volumes, depending on which ones they are. So this one is the color one, so I'd call that RVTV color, and the other one RVTV height. None of this renaming is necessary, but as your projects get bigger, it's useful to have things well organized so you don't get confused over what's there. One final thing before we end today is a problem that I noticed, some of you may have noticed as well, that we really ought to solve. If I go into play mode here and I go up to some of my grasses, let's look at particularly where there's a slope. You can see here where it's going uphill. If I get low down, can you see how that grass is hovering above the landscape? And you may have seen that and gone, that doesn't look right. How do I fix that? So let me quickly show you how to. Well, I'll tell you what the problem is, and it's a quick fix. So let's come out of play mode here. Let's open up in PCG, let's open up our PCG landscape. And the problem is that we were creating these clumps of grass using this create points grid and projecting it onto the landscape. And then we were then using this transform points here, if I open that up a bit, to give it a little bit of randomness left and right. Well, that's fine, except that on a slope, if we move it to the left or right too much, it might be hovering over the landscape. So we just need to make sure that after we've done this random movement, we need to reproject it onto the landscape. So let's quickly fix that. Let's move our static mesh spawner. And what we can do is we can just grab the get landscape data and projection nodes here, do a Control D to copy, move them over here, and then we'll plug in fact, let's just disconnect this with Alt, plug the exit of this transform, and then from there we will plug it back into the static mesh spawner. So now, after we've moved it around a little bit randomly, we're now reprojecting it onto the landscape so it sticks back down there. So that should solve the problem. Let's save that. Let's go back here. If I go into play mode again and I go up to that slope, you can see that that grass here is now stuck to the landscape. So a quick fix to a problem I noticed, and hopefully that wasn't annoying you too much. So that's the end of today's episode. In the next episode, we're going to do part 2 of runtime virtual textures. So first one was quite long. Next one's going to be probably quite a long episode as well. But what we're going to do is we're going to take our runtime virtual texture and add distance-based blending to it so we can see the near tiling and the far tiling. And once we've done that, we're going to do a better job with the blending of the meshes to the landscape, with some blending transitions and also using something called normal blending as well. So stay tuned for that, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.